Tarisland beta is starting November 15th, and you guys are probably wondering which class you guys should play. Now, I played probably 100 plus hours of Tarisland, so hopefully I can give you guys a good guide on which class to choose and which class probably suits best for your type of play. So let's jump right into it. Remember, when the beta comes out, I will be streaming every day on YouTube and Twitch. Now, it's important to remember that they're making a lot of changes to the classes. Most of the classes that were good during beta 1 might not be as good during this beta. There's a lot of new changes to skills, buffs, and nerfs, but I will try to take everything into account when giving you guys my opinion. Now, let's start with the class I play the most, which is the Paladin. The Paladin was the strongest class in my opinion overall. It was both the specs, both the DPS specs and tank specs were really good. And what made Paladin so good was that it was strong early game and strong late game, because a lot of classes were not as strong early game as some classes got lackluster end game, but the Paladin performed really good DPS wise early game and end game. The same goes for the tank, but let's talk about the DPS side first. So the Paladin does require a little bit of mechanics. You can just button mash it and do some incredible DPS, but if you knew how to play it and use the correct talent tree, it could dish out some insane amount of damage. Not a lot of AoE damage, unfortunately. It was more focused on single target DPS, but it could dish out some good amount of damage. However, from what I'm hearing, since it was such a strong class, it is getting nerfed, so I don't expect it to be as high DPS wise as it was before. So be careful going with the Paladin DPS class. Now, for the tank class, the tank was super strong both in PvP and PvE because it used a lot of shields and it could do self-healing, which made it almost unbeatable in PvP and super reliable in PvE. It could tank a lot without receiving a lot of healing because of the shields, but from what I'm hearing, it might not be as strong anymore, which will make it on par with the other tanks most likely. So yes, it was absolutely fantastic, but they have already confirmed that they have changed the Paladin a little bit, probably some different type of skills, a different type of gameplay, but Paladin was a strong choice, but will still be a decent choice, but don't expect it to be the top one class anymore. Next up is a warrior. I played the warrior also in the earlier beta, and the warrior is overall the most like balanced class, I have to say, because the DPS class can dish out some good damage. It is a little slow at the start, and then it gets better and better over time, but once it gets its good set and the skills end game, it becomes really good because it has a really good AoE skill. A lot of raids have ads spawning. A lot of speed runs require a lot of ads to die, and the warrior is perfect for that. It has good single target damage, but also good AoE skill to cover for that AoE damage, and can do very good in PvP too. So overall, the warrior class gets stronger over time. Again, it is getting changed, but it's a solid choice as a melee DPS. If you're used to playing warriors in the game, or some type of berserker class, is definitely the class for you. It plays a lot on rage. You have to accumulate rage, and then use the rage to do different skills and the combinations. The tank class is also very solid. It has a lot of mitigation skills. Overall, a very solid balanced tank. It wasn't broken like the Paladin, but it could hold its own in raids. Now, with the probably nerf of Paladin, I think warrior and Paladin might be just as good, but they will have different type of tanking abilities. So again, very balanced and solid choice going for the warrior. Next up is the Barbarian. Now, the Barbarian has two specs, again, DPS and tank. It has Thunder, which is the DPS spec, and overall Thunder also started scaling better later on in the game. It wasn't as strong early game, but the nice thing with the Barbarian is it gives a buffs to your teammates. It has some skills that boost damage around the Barbarian, so if your other melee classes playing close to with the Barbarian, you can get damage boosts. So it has a little damage boost, but I have to say it was lackluster when it comes to overall DPS compared to the other classes, but having that buff makes it really strong. So if you're used to like supporting your teammates, fighting in massive like raids and stuff, Barbarian would be a good choice. Also, they're buffing the Barbarian, which will be a good thing, so it might be viable to play it next to the other melee classes. When it comes to the tank, the Frozen spec, the tank was very lackluster. I played it during one of the betas. It wasn't very good compared to the warrior or the paladin, but it is getting buffed, so you might see some new mitigation skills. I saw some leaks of the new changes, so it looks to have focus on, like, it would be like kind of similar to warrior. It will have like a lot of like mitigation skills where it will buff its stats, its shield stats, and its tankiness with its skill, so might get another 3 viable tank. So these are the 3 melee classes, and in my opinion, their DPS is going to be decent. It's going to be uses for it in specific scenarios, but I don't think overall they will have as much high DPS as the other classes. And the reason for that is all these 3 classes, Paladin, Warrior, and Barbarian, they're very tanky. So they can't like have the best of each world, right? They can't have super high DPS and be super tanky, but they will have decent amount of damage, so you will be able to contribute to the team like you want. If you're used to playing tank, honestly, go with the tank that you feel like suits your playstyle. If you're used to having like a lot of shields, healing, go for the Paladin. If you like mitigation type of skills, go for the Barbarian or the Warrior. Next up is the Ranger. Ranger was probably the class I play with the most in raids. My teammates were playing Rangers. It was super strong. The hunting, there's two talent trees within Ranger, or 2 specs to choose between versus hunting, and hunting was very strong. It's the high solo DPS tree that people used in raids, that people use in PvE, and it was very strong both early game and end game, and it had like some skills where it boosts its damage if you stand still for a long time, so it worked in many raids that required Rangers not to move too much. But when it comes to the tamed class, the tamed class did scale damage wise better once you got the set bonuses and stuff, but it was very lackluster compared to the hunting class, which is why it is also getting a buff. So I think we will be seeing more hunting Rangers coming this beta, but I do not think Ranger will be as strong as it was in the beta 1, because the other classes are getting stronger, but it will still be one of the top classes to play. So you can't go wrong with Ranger. You will have high DPS, and you will be viable in raids, in PvE, and in PvP. Next up, we have the Mage. Now, the Mage did underperform in the last beta. However, if you got used to playing the Mage, you could actually dish out some good damage. During our second kill, because we had the world's first kill on all the raids, but on the second raid we were struggling with DPS, so we switched out 1 warrior for a mage, and we were able to get that damage. So Mage overall can perform very well, but perform less than the other DPSs. However, it seems like the Mage is getting a lot of buffs both in its flame tree and its frost tree. Frost did get better over time. When we get closer to the end game, the frost class did perform better than the flame class, but I think overall both specs work. Both the flame and frost, both have different type of gameplay to it, and they're making it easier for people to track the build up with the frost, because frost was kind of hard to tell, because you have to like stack up different type of skills and different type of frost damage to deal damage, and it was very hard to track. But now they made it way easier, so I can see Mage being one of the top DPSs coming close the next beta for sure. Next, there's 2 new classes. We're going to go through them at the end, but let's talk about the 2 healers. So the Bard, let's talk about the Bard. The Bard DPS is called Solo. That's the spec. The DPS of Bard end game, this is end game. Early game, it was not good at all, but when we got to the end game, Bards were solo DPS was super strong. I was hoping that we had more Bards, because they were dishing out some amazing damage, but they also had buffs, so they could buff teammates so we could do even more damage in raids. But I heard that they rechanged everything about the bard. There's a lot of changes with the bard, a lot of buffs also with the bard, and they're making bard way easier to play. So I'm kind of interested to see where it goes with it, but it might be a good thing or a bad thing. We don't like, it's too difficult to say because they're buffing it. But if they buffed it like it was before, it would destroy every single class. But it makes sense that they're buffing it and changing it at the same time, so it might not be as strong as I am imagining it would be. Now the heal side of the bard, which was harmony, I think it's called, was a little bit more complicated healer to play. It required you to be a little more understanding of the class, a little more skillful. It provided a lot of shields to tanks, to teammates, a lot of shields, a lot of reductions, but also was able to do healing. So it had like a little bit of everything, and you have to kind of rotate and understand the class to actually be good at playing bard and healing with it. It also had a revive skill, which is awesome, so you could revive teammates. But again, the bard healer was a little more tricky to play, which might be why they're changing it and making it probably easier. Hopefully not, but overall a bard was a great class to play for a healer. Definitely check out the bard if you like something a little bit more skillful. Next up is the priest. Priest DPS is called Faith. It was decent. It has the priest has I think the craziest burst from all the classes, like DPS wise. If it was like a short fight, like a 20-second fight or 30-second fight, because there is like these solo dungeons, the priest could do some crazy damage with the burst, but overall damage over time, in like a longer fight, it can't keep up with the other DPSs. But if you're looking for a burst class that could do crazy amount of damage in a short time, priest was really good at that. So for PvP, for example, when you have the burst players, it's great for that. But overall, like DPS wise, I would not recommend it. Now the healing is probably I would say it's the best healer in the game, because it is like the normal healer that you guys see in most games. It's the typical priest. It has fast healings, AoE heals, fast single target heals, not long casting, very easy to play, very beginner friendly class to play. So if you're used to like being like a main healer and just dishing out a lot of heals out, priest was great for that. The heal spec is called Pray, I think, and overall the healing was great. But I think they're making changes to it also, and they're adding a revive to the priest, so both healers can revive, which is good. So if you're used to playing more complicated healer with like some shields, reductions, a little bit of healing, bard is for you. If you're used to playing like the typical main healer where you just dish out a bunch of healing, go for the priest. Next up, we have the two new classes. First, we have the ShadowSwordsman, which is the assassin. Now, there was an assassin in the last beta. Some guy, even though it was locked and you weren't allowed to play it, some dude was able to get the class, and he played it, and he was top of the damage meters. And I have to say, the reason for the class being locked for so long was in the first Chinese beta, the assassin was too overpowered, so they couldn't like introduce it. That they rechange the whole class, which they did. But I still think it would perform really good, because I've seen some kind of stats early game though, so we don't know how it will perform later in the game, but early game I've seen that the assassin can dish out one of the highest DPSs. So the assassin have two talent traits, which is cunning, which is very strong PvE wise. It does a lot of like bleeding, poison damage, like you're used to from other games. A lot of like bleeding damage, dishing out some high DPS. The second tree that it has is called a duel, which is more like a PvP thing, where you can like sneak around, find a weak spot, and it seems like I was reading like the talent trees and the skills of the assassin, and it was kind of weird to me because first of all, it seems like it will require a lot of skill to actually play the assassin, but at the same time it also looked very simple, which was really confusing because some things about the assassin, it looked very simple, while some things looked very difficult. So it might be very easy to master, but also might be like the hardest class to master. Like I can't say because we need to see more of this, but if you're looking to play like a melee DPS, high damage, one of the top highest DPS classes, go for the assassin. And if you're used to like sneaking around in arenas and PvP and stuff, it's definitely the class for you. Now the last class, the Phantom. I mean, there's no name for it yet, but like I saw from the Chinese beta, it's called like Phantom Priest or Phantom something. So they might change the name, of course, we don't know, but it's the new class that look like this forest priest, forest druid, some people call it. Some people call it warlock. But this class, I have seen some stuff from this class, not much, but a little bit. And the things I know about this class is it would be a healer and a DPS. Now the healer of this class, the healer side of this class, actually has the ability to dish out some damage. Like compared to the full-on healer Bard Harmony and the priest Prey healer, compared to those, it actually dishes out some damage. So that makes me think is it's not going to be like a main healer. Remember, this is just assumptions right now, but from what I have seen, I don't think it's going to be like the main healer. I think it would be perfect like a secondary healer, and it would be great for like speed running. Like if you run like mythic dungeons, speed running, doing fast content, it will be perfect because it can dish out damage but also heal at the same time. And sometimes some of the skills is when you dish out damage, you heal your teammate with the amount of damage you're dishing out. So it'll be a very like complicated class to play from what I'm seeing so far, and very interesting. So if you want to test out something new, definitely try it out. It is a beta, so why not check out the new class and see what it's all about. If you like it, you like it. If not, you have other options, right? And the DPS side of this class, since we don't know what the talent trees are called, I can just say healer class or DPS side. But the DPS side can actually dish out a high amount of damage. It's one of the highest DPSers in the game. From what I've seen early game though, might change end game again, we don't know because there's so many changes. But from what I've seen, the Chinese players had like a closed beta for like a few days, so we were able to test out these different classes. But you don't have to worry about it not being able to do enough damage if you go for it, because all the healers seems like will have their own purpose when it comes to being able to dish out damage, either as support damage or just straight up crazy damage. Now to make it to summarize everything, if you're gonna play tank, remember all the 3 tanks seems to be more balanced this time. You won't have like a crazy paladin compared to the other classes. The other classes, like the warrior, might be even the better tank this time around. But if you're used to, and if you want to play like a tanky melee class, both warrior, barbarian, and paladin is good. Now again, paladin more like a single target focused DPS, warrior more like single target but also has good AoE damage, and then the barbarian is good single target, some AoE, but also gives teammate buff. So all 3 are good choices. If you're going for a range DPS, I think the mage will perform the highest out of like the range DPS, closely followed up with the ranger and the new class, the shadow priest, or I'm calling it phantom priest for now, okay? And if you're looking for like a crazy out damage dealer, a melee class, go for the assassin. And when it comes to the healer, if you're used to playing the normal type of healer in most games, main healing, dishing out a crazy amount of heals all the time, everywhere, go for the priest. If you're used to playing a healer that has more of damage reduction, some shields, a little bit of healing, a little more complicated class to play, go for the bard. And if you want to play out a whole new class which dishes out some damage while being able to heal, go for the new phantom class. But that is like an overall summary of the classes. And remember, everything that I've said here is my experience from all the other betas that was before this, and looking at the changes that the developers have listed and that they have talked about, the balancing, and getting a little bit of information from the new beta So just remember, this is not confirmed. This is just to give you guys like an idea of what classes to choose and what class to play. But I think each and every class will have its own good sides, so you cannot go wrong, to be honest, with any of these choices. But I hope to see you guys in the next beta. Remember, I'll be streaming every day on YouTube and Twitch. Take it easy, check out this right here, and I'll see you guys next time.